Networking and marketing made simple is for you, the business owner that has a product, service, or message that you truly believe in. My name is Scott Aaron, and each week we'll take a behind the scenes look at real world networking and marketing tactics while leveraging LinkedIn to get what you have in front of many more people. Thanks for spending time with me, and let's get started. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Networking and Marketing Made Simple. Super excited for today's episode for obviously two reasons. Number one, you guys know that this is an interview episode, so you get to hear the journey, the story from other entrepreneurs of what they have done, their backstories, and how they've gotten to the place that they are. Also, just excited because I always love returning the favor of being a guest on others' podcasts. I was on Zach's podcast a little while ago. And in the podcasting world and the entrepreneur world, it's so important to scratch each other's backs and to support each other, to help each other grow. And that's exactly what we're doing today. Zach is the founder and co-founder of Summit Chasers. We're going to talk about all that and more. He's got such an interesting background, lots of ups and downs, twists and turns, and there's a lot of things that him and I resonated with even before we jumped into recording on either this podcast and his. So I'm really looking forward to having him share all that with you. So Zach, with all that behind us, welcome to today's episode.
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the sentiment, my friend. We always got to support each other. So it's really, really cool you're doing this.
100%. That's what it's all about. So before we get into like Summit Chasers and everything, I'm always wanting to hear people's stories, and you have such a diverse and interesting background from all the things that you've done, which I'm not going to give away any of those. People are going to have to listen to the episode to get those things. But if you had to put your life in reverse and rewind the tape and press stop at a certain point that you feel was a catalytic moment for you that kind of set you on this path and this journey that you're on, what was that moment for you?
It would have been, that's a good question. I'm stealing that one. It would have to be the moment maybe not the moment, but shortly after the moment I got injured so I was fighting professionally. I was living in Vegas, and we had a wrestling team. I can't remember where they're from, but I'm Canadian, so we don't wrestle a ton. So they're much better. They're like a Division I team. And I was wrestling with them, and the guy was so strong he pulled my femur out of place. Like, it dislocated my hip. So, but that pushed me out of a sport that I wasn't 100% in, and it kind of gave me an out, and it forced me to kind of look at some other things. And the decision that I made after that, which was the decision to not fight to stay in the US, it was to just go back to Canada, kind of lick my wounds. And that's what kind of opened up my mind to my next sport that I was a professional in, which was CrossFit, which I didn't even know that I could compete in, let alone be a professional athlete in. And it was that decision to go all in, to leave the fighting behind me and go all in on the fitness, like fitness racing. And because that's what ultimately pushed me towards being an entrepreneur and having that, like, finding my true passion. Like, I was a hobbyist entrepreneur for the longest time before I was like, oh, this is what I love to do, truly. But that was the decision, was to leave, because fighting is what saved my life, really. Like, because I was an addict. I was homeless by the time I was 18, and I was an addict in small town Canada, and fighting was what got me out of it. It was that focus. It was I had something else to push the obsession onto. So I always thought that, okay, this is just what I'm supposed to do. This is who I am. Right. So
Do you
go ahead.
remember the person that recommended the fighting aspect of things to kind of get you back on the right path?
His name, it was my boxing coach. His name was Gord. Still don't know his last name. But I was I was sleeping in it was during the day, and I was passed out in one of those like horizontal tubes. It's like a slide, but it's not a slide. So there was one that I would frequent, and I was laying in it. My legs were hanging out, and he would always come check on me. And I still remember, every time I tell the story, I feel the stinger when he kicked me in my calf. You know, when you get kicked or get hit just below the knee on the side there, your whole foot goes numb. But that always sticks out in my head. And he hit me there, and he's like, dude, what are you doing with your life? And this is a guy, he's pretty rough around the edges. This isn't like, he didn't graduate high school or anything like that. And he's like, what are you doing, dude? Like you have all this potential that you're wasting away. I'm like, okay, dad, whatever. Like I'm not gonna who's gonna hire me right now? I'm not gonna get a job. He's like, I'm not talking about getting a job. I'm talking about let's go buy a shirt. So that was kind of it was those steps. Like even just buying a shirt seemed like a lot, let alone getting a job. So he went and bought a shirt, and we went to this place called the Bargain Store in town where I'm from, and it was a red shirt. It had one of those kind of like the smiling emoji, but it was kind of like melting, like somebody had painted it. And the paint was still wet. I still remember the shirt. I don't know where the shirt went, but I remember that shirt. But that was kind of that was the catalyst. And again, he was my boxing coach. So he's like, let's focus on this. So I'm going to train you for free for this much time, and like we're just going to go all out. Like this is what we're going to do for now. And then that's kind of what got me out of it. Like he helped me put my obsession onto something else and get me out of it. And then it slowly got clean, and then I got a job at the local swimming pool, and then I had started competing in martial arts more and more and more, and I was kind of like that's what got me out of it. So I was like, well, that's what got me out of it. This is my safe place, which is weird that fighting is your safe place. It's not usually correlated with safety, but it was for me. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all out. And then I had a sister that moved to Vegas, and then Gord's actually the one that convinced me to move to Las Vegas. But he was played a big part in convincing me to move to Las Vegas, and I moved to Las Vegas, and then that's when my actual professional career kind of started.
So obviously there's a different skill sets that we all have and disciplines within those skills. For me, you and I both have a fitness background. I came from the world of, bodybuilding and powerlifting. And, people ask me all the time, what were some of the big things that you took away from that? And for me, it was structure, routine, but also goal setting. My dad just had a double knee replacement. I went to go visit him the other day in rehab. And, I said to him, like, I remember the days because he still competes in bench press contests and stuff, but he's, obviously can't do that right now until he gets full flexion back of his
Mhm.
knees. But for me, I remember carrying around a manila envelope with
Mhm.
just sheets of paper. And I had it, you know, my bench, my dead, my squat, and then all my sub movements.
Mhm.
Romanian deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts, extensions, curls, leg press. And I would build to a 1 rep max for all of them. And I would pace it out over, 8 to 10 weeks. So
Mhm.
I would do a percentage of my bench on week one, say 50% of my goal max, but I always had something that I was reaching for, something that I was striving for, something that like a focal point. I needed a
Mhm.
North Star. I needed a compass. What was that North Star and that compass for you in the world of boxing and then kind of bleeding into martial arts that kind of kept you going and kept you moving forward?
I love the way you said that, and I've said this before in other podcasts. Is that's what kept my discipline. It was a mark on my calendar. It was a date. I had a date, so I had a fight coming up in 6 weeks. So I knew that I had to train 6 weeks. I had to make it 6 weeks, and then I could structure everything backwards from there. So that's what created the structure was the mark on the calendar. And then when I get into it, I love you walk around with a notebook. I would always like invest. When I say invest, I'd always buy a nice journal because you buy nice things. I want to carry it around. I want to write nicely in it. I want to keep things organized in it. So when I shifted to CrossFit, I would every 4 weeks I knew what I was doing. So I knew this week these are my workouts on Monday, Tuesday. Or I would plan out everything, and I would do train like almost 12 training sessions a week, and they were all planned out. I would make sure that I planned them out beforehand, and they're all nicely written in my journal. And I'd put my, whatever my times were, the weights I lifted, everything was recorded nicely in there. But it was always had a date on the calendar. I know I have a competition here. I know this is the workouts that are going to be in. I know the races that are going to be in here. This is who I'm fighting. This is what I need to work on. Right. So you always had that data on the calendar and what that data on the calendar represented to then structure what I was doing for the time leading up to that time on the calendar. And it wasn't until afterwards I realized that you need if you don't have those anymore, like that was tough. Like getting into like the entrepreneur world, because that's an infinite game. Like there's no, I mean, unless you have like a specific launch or you have a webinar coming up, but that's you putting it on the calendar. That's you having to create that and put it on the calendar. So as long as I always created something and put it on the calendar and had something to work backwards from, that was when I worked the best. But it kind of goes from like that being pressed upon you to like you have a fight date here or you have a competition here or whatever it is to like I have to create that date on the calendar. I have to do that. I have to create it. That was kind of the biggest change I had to do, but that's what worked best for me is put something on the calendar, define what I had to do to achieve that, and then work backwards.
If it's not written down, it's not going to get done. I said there's an old
No.
adage that goes along with that. So this is more of a sidebar personal question. I always wondered this from MMA fighters because I'm friends with a couple. My dad used to train a bunch of the guys. What's that mindset shift? Because again, like if people could see you, you don't look like a violent person. Obviously, you don't sound like a violent person, but there's a switch, and athletes talk about this. Like, and even when I was doing, my power lifts, when I would get under a squat bar, with four plates on each side, and I was doing, over 400 pounds for reps, and I was, getting in front of a loaded bar for a deadlift close to 500 pounds. There's a switch that you need to, turn on. How did you make, and this kind of goes for everything that you did, your boxing, your MMA, your CrossFit. How do you make that internal switch? Like what did you do to help you shift your mindset, block everything else out, and get you in that zone that you had to be in to, compete in CrossFit, to face that person looking across from you in the octagon or, the boxing ring?
I mean, I think it parallels great with like even in sales. Like you come into like there's an outcome you want to achieve, like a very clear outcome you want to achieve, and you want to do everything you can to increase the odds of you achieving the outcome. So, and obviously the repercussions vary by what you're doing. Obviously, in a fight, the repercussions are a lot different than in a sales because you don't get the sale, you don't get the sale, move on. You lose a fight, that injury could last forever. But it was when everything closed, it was just me and one other person. And like even bull riders back in where I'm from in Canada, we do a lot of bull riding. And they say the same thing. When that's locked, it's just me and that bull, or it's just me and that person. And that's all I can focus on. That's it. Nothing else. Like the crowd goes silent. Even if they're screaming, you can't hear them because it's just this. This is all it is. This is all the work you've done that you've put into this. It's the game plan almost goes out the window immediately. So everything's muscle memory. Like you fall to the level of your preparation, right? And it's just the focus is so singular, right? So like if you're going up to a barbell, like there's only a few things you can focus on, right? If you're going up to a heavy barbell, you're not focusing on like you're not actively focusing on, okay, I need to brace my core. Okay, I need to pull down on the bar. I need to brace my lats. Okay, now I'm going to like drive my heels into the ground or externally rotate, whatever your cues were. You're not thinking all of that when you're going under that much weight, right? It's just you and the bar. And that's all you're thinking about, right? And then obviously people are yelling at you to drive, and you might have an own like your own internal cue that keeps you driving up, that helps you. But again, it's very singular. So when you're in that cage, the worst part is leading up to it. The worst part is walking out. The worst part is warming up in the back. I'm throwing up. Every bad situation that could possibly go wrong is going through my head, right? But I've come this far. I'm not going to back out because then I would look like a sissy, right? But once you get in there, once that's locked, it's so singular. Like it's just like you almost don't have time to even think. You don't have time to regret, right? It's just you and that person. There's no going back now. It's just you and whatever muscle memory, whatever reactions you keep from training, and that's it. And then just don't quit. And then once you get going, honestly, it's fun. It's gonna sound it's kind of crazy, but you get hit a few times, you realize it doesn't hurt that bad unless you get kicked. Getting kicked hurts so bad, like in the arms and the stomach, and like that hurts bad. But getting hit in the head's not as bad comparatively. But once you get into the rhythm, and then your focus narrows even more, and you're just flowing. It's actually a lot of fun, and you're not even thinking about anything else, right? You're just not like a lot. People asked me that before, like, what's the mindset of going into a fight? It's like I'm terrified, and if anybody says otherwise, they're absolutely insane. Like it's scary. It's a scary thing. It's what I was good at. It's what I like to do. I love the training, and then when you get locked into there with one other person, that's all you think about. That's it.
Now, moving from MMA to competitive CrossFit, obviously, one is, obviously you versus another person, but, there's a competitive aspect to CrossFit, whether it's the CrossFit Games or just individual PRs. What was the hardest transition to bridge between training for MMA to now going to a lot of the Olympic and dynamic movements of CrossFit?
Physically, it was fairly similar actually, because again, there's a lot of parallels between the two, which like mixed martial arts, that's what it is in the name mixed, right? You're not just kickboxing, you're not just boxing, you're not just doing jujitsu, you're not just wrestling. Everything has to work together. CrossFit's the same thing. I could be running 5 miles one event, and then I could, have to do like a max deadlift the next, and then some of them will have like a mix of the two or whatever it is, right? So you had to be good at everything. Like it's about the whole ball of wax. There's a lot of parallels between the two in business. I'm just focusing on the whole ball of wax. But the biggest thing was that surprised me was that I actually found CrossFit to be a lot harder mentally than fighting. Because like if you're not fitter than the people around you, it's really hard to just outwork them in the moment, right? Like it's all about preparation at that point. Like if you don't prepare, you're not going to win. But when you're in a fight, like you can outgrind somebody. Like you can land a lucky punch. Like you can bear down on your mouthpiece and go for it, right? And but when you're fitness, you're so like you're capped. You go in, you have a cap, right? You go into a fight, you have a certain cap, but there's still a chance. Right? There's some things you can do. But in CrossFit, it was like I'd fall behind and like I can't go hit the person and get the time back. You know what I mean? So it was almost that was the biggest surprise probably. It was like that mental aspect of like you're only as good as you are when you show up. Like there's no way that you can outperform somebody if you don't prepare appropriately.
So let's talk about the entrepreneurial side of things. So you get into CrossFit and the entrepreneurial spark was lit. What
Mhm.
what enabled that to happen, and what did you then, outside of putting your time, your energy, and effort to your body and keeping yourself healthy, what did you start pouring a lot of your time, focus, and energy on business wise to help really feed that entrepreneurial itch that you wanted to scratch?
Yeah, so I one of the gyms, well, the first gym that I wanted to join when I came back and I found out I could compete in CrossFit, I was like, I need a gym to train at because I moved back to the small town. The closest city was about an hour and a half away, so I needed a place to train, and I didn't want to have to make the drive all the time, so I needed to find like a nest egg in the city. So and there was a gym that was kind of struggling, but I really loved the people, and they're like, well, if you buy in, you can sleep in this room over here, and then you can train, obviously whenever you want. And I was like, okay, I had a little bit of money left over from my last few fights, and the exchange rate was pretty good from the US to Canada. So I bought into the gym really, really, really small percentage. And I remember the first time, it was only a few months after that, we had our first like meeting, and we went through like P&L statements and that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, we have like 200 members. There's like $200 a month, so like we're making really good money. And then we get it, and I look at like the P&L statement at the end, and it's like single digits. And I was like, what's that? Like, why is that number so low? Like, where did all the money go? And I just like, obviously, there's a lot of overhead and, fixed costs, and you're hiring people, equipment, things break, leases, yada, yada. And so I'm like, oh, so this isn't as simple as I thought it was. So then I got obsessed with, okay, how do I make that number go up? So that was in my off time because when I wasn't training, I was either training or coaching the classes, or I was like my trainers would say, like, don't move, like just recover. Like that's what you need to be doing. Like I'm working out hard 12 days a week or 12 workouts a week. And then I'm coaching a few hours a day. Like if you're not doing any of that, just you're not doing anything. You're getting massages and you're in ice baths and that's it. So during that time, I mean, and YouTube wasn't huge, as big as it is now, anyways, but I was learning as much as I could. And there was a lot of like that was the first time I read the Jim Collins book was in 2014. I think it was good to great or built to last. I can't remember which one it was. Um, but I got obsessed with that. I got obsessed with how to make the number go up. How does a business run? How can a business be successful? How does it last? Um, and I got obsessed with that. And I started learning marketing and sales and okay, how can we diversify some of our revenue streams? I started getting sponsorships with supplement companies. Like, okay, I thought about strategic partnerships differently and how do I have those conversations? And you bring people in and you bundle. And I said this to you, I think on your podcast, like the best I think like industry wise foundation for sales is in fitness because you're selling a pipe dream. You're selling a bunch of work at the possibility you'll get the outcome. Like that's a tough sell. Like in business, and it doesn't work all the time like that, but it's like, okay, you do this, you get this outcome, and usually that outcome's a bunch of money. Where like, okay, you do this, it's going to be really hard. You might get some of the results you want, and it's not going to make you any money, like directly, anyways, right? So that sales foundation was really, I really learned a lot. and that, and kind of how to, speak to the emotions of people, and find the gap, and solve their problems and that kind of stuff. But anyways, I learned, how to increase, profit per square inch of the gym, and how to utilize time better, because at that period of time, it was a lot of like time and space for money, right? Where that's not really a space you want to be in. So, okay, how can I optimize that as much as possible? And then we got that gym to like basically a negative P&L, to like we were starting to see like 10, 15, $20,000 green. And then we invested in another gym, and then I brought a lot of that same systems over to that gym. So I went from athlete inside performance to Infinity 5 Fitness, and then I sold both of those, or my shares for both of those. And then we went to CrossFit 956, did the same thing there. And I did that with six gyms, where I basically just like bought into them and flipped them. And but by the end of it, I had a pretty good system. And that's when like the whole gym launch thing was they're just starting to get prevalent. So I ended up working with them for one of the gyms, and a lot of it was stuff I was already doing, like, how to launch a gym, how to get everybody excited, how to get like, pre-sales, and how to market it properly, and then bundle it. So like, okay, here's programs that we can sell on the side that bundles with the supplements and bundles with other programs. Okay, I partnered with massage therapists and physiotherapists to come in and rent rooms, and then brought them in on that. Like, how do we bundle this and compensate them? So we had a pretty good system. And then I met one of my sponsors at the time. They were opening up like they wanted to be kind of like an all-encompassing, they wanted a big fitness facility, and they sold fitness equipment. And so they came in and they're like, hey, we want you to open this giant, like, say giant, it was like 10,000 square feet. Some gyms, that's not very big, but for boutique gyms at that point, it's not really boutique, it's a big gym. So we came in and we opened up that facility, and we grew both the fitness equipment side parallel with the performance center. When I joined, they were doing about 1.8 million, I think, on the fitness equipment side, maybe just under 1.8. And then by the time I left, about 2.5, 3 years later, we are doing just under 25. So we had grown that a lot. And that was just, again, strategic partnerships, utilizing. So there's a concept that Jim Collins teaches, it's the hedgehog concept. And it's like three intersecting circles. And one of the circles is what drives your economic engine. And that's one thing that got me really thinking when we were working, when I was growing that business, was we were importing a lot of our steel from China. So we were trying to think, okay, how can we, and the lead times are brutal. So we're thinking, okay, how can we increase our profit per square inch of steel? So we're thinking of all the different ways we could diversify that through leasing equipment to competitions and conventions, to especially the bigger competitions, because they would have like 8 or 9 different rigs set up at a time, and that's like each rig is like 3 tons of steel. Like, that's a lot. So we would have where we would lease it. We'd have a team that go out and put them up for them and everything. And also, one of the other companies he ran, a freight, like his mothership, I call it like the mothership, was a freight. So he had already had a huge distribution chain that could go all across Canada. So we were set up to grow, right? But that's where I know, like, building a team, understanding it's all about who you bring on your team. Like, it's the who before the how. If you ever read any Dan Sullivan stuff, it's focus on the who, and then they'll work with you to figure out the how. And I had learned that the hard way a few times, but is really like, how do I find these people? And then how do I hire? I go from hiring jacks of all trades. Okay, now I need to hire people who are masters at what they do. Like, specifically, I need to hire salespeople, marketing people, product development people, logistics. So that was when I really got like, okay, this is how business is supposed to run. This is the ball of wax I was talking about, right? Um, and then we had some core value differences. Let's put it that way. If you want to hear the real story, I'll tell you off. But I ended up moving back to Canada. We just had a daughter. Sorry, I moved back to the U.S. We just had a daughter. She wanted to be closer to my now ex-wife's family. She was from the U.S. Moved back to the U.S. and we had some money left over from the buyout, and we wanted to, like, okay, well, we've done it before in Canada. Let's open, a gym and try to see if we can turn it to kind of a chain in Vegas. That was the end of 2019. We dumped all of our money into this. COVID hits. We lost absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. Like, to the point where I had to go work at not go, I had to work out of our garage, but I had to do customer service for Netflix, like for $12 an hour. And in the now spring summerish time in Vegas, in our garage, we just had a newborn. My son was born, lost everything. I was in my underwear basically answering these phone calls from old ladies that like lost their remote. And I had a little, like the size of my monitor, basically a little air conditioning unit that I had to put like 2 feet away from me. And then every call I had to turn it off. And some of the calls like 45 minutes and 120-degree heat in the garage. It was brutal. But and then it got to a point where it's like I need to get out of this. Like I did enough to survive. Like we have food on our table. I need to go. I need to go do what I was supposed to do. And I found a guy who started a gym in downtown Las Vegas, and he was also a keynote speaker. So I knew that there was other opportunities we could kind of utilize. And I came in, I was like, hey man, this is what I've done at other gyms. I think I could do it with yours. Let's give it a shot. And he was a big thinker as well. And so yeah, we turned this little 1,100 square foot tiny gym downtown Las Vegas into a $200,000 a month profit generator. Like, and this was like ever like we had online. I was doing life coaching and business coaching as well at the time too. So we had a lot of clients that were doing a little bit of both. We had coaches that were doing online nutrition plans and all this kind of stuff that I had learned. I actually worked for a company called V-Shred. I don't know if you're familiar with V-Shred. I helped them build out a lot of their online nutrition coaching platform and all that kind of stuff. But so I had a lot of experience there. So we built it out really, really well in a really short period of time. And then we had a client who was from the California, and they owned a bail bonds company. And they're like, you know what, a lot of the stuff you're doing would work with my sales team. And I was like, well, I looked at him, I was like, yeah, I mean, probably. So we worked with their sales team. We went out, we did a workshop on like accountability and sales and leadership and that kind of stuff. And it crushed. And then so we worked with them for about 6 months, and they went from being stagnant at about 40 million for years to that year they were going to show a $60 million. So they jumped incredibly. And I'm not to say that wasn't all us, but it was a small piece. It was a good like, okay, the stuff works, right? It doesn't not work. So we're like, okay, are we going to do this then? So we're like, this is our bold move, I guess. So we dropped everything January 21, and that's what we started doing. We're doing workshops, keynotes, leadership consulting, sales coaching, sales leadership coaching. Ended up working with some amazing companies. When HP was acquiring Zerto, they hired us to work with Zerto, and Hewlett Packard, Salesforce, Car Gurus, Nextdoor, and obviously a lot of smaller SMEs, with like the sales leadership in general, executive coaching. And that's really where I started getting obsessed, was just business foundations. Like, and I worked with a lot of like these entrepreneurs are and in business, they're like the dreamers, they're the problem solvers, they're the innovators, right? Like so many of our innovations that we have today, all this great new stuff that comes up is from like startup, like founders, like entrepreneurs that see a problem, they put their hands up like, hey, I'm the one that's going to solve this. And then they start a business, but they don't have like that business foundation. They usually just get it to a point where they can sell it, or they get it to a point where not everybody can appreciate and experience the innovation and creativeness and the problems that they're solving. They can't experience it yet. So that, and I've seen that a lot, where they're so passionate about their product or so passionate about like the service that they're providing, but the business foundation just isn't there. Like, you know, like for long term existence, right? So they can truly solve problems to the extent that they want to. So that's where I kind of that's my kind of obsession and purpose, and that's where I kind of broke off. And with my partner, that's why we started Summit Chasers, is to work with those entrepreneurs that maybe don't have, you know, an MBA, or you know, their family business. They didn't have a family business they could learn the ropes in. But they have these great ideas, and they're willing to, they want to change the world. They just need the platform and the business foundation to do so.
You know, Nancy and I, my wife, that is, we always talk about, without the foundations of your business, you can't put up the walls, can't put in the windows, can't put on the door.
No.
And the other thing that really populated for me was systems work. And that's also something that Nancy and I believe in, is that if you have a system and a structure to what you teach or what you do, and it's duplicatable, it will continue to produce results no matter what the company, no matter what the business, no matter how big or small, it works that way.
Mhm.
So now with Summit Chaser, so for people listening to this that are not, obviously it's a wonderful backstory, but talk to the people listening to this podcast or watching this that are an ideal fit, you know, for Summit Chasers, and also talk about, you know, when that person steps forward and says, you know what, Zach, like I need Summit Chasers help. Where is that person now before working with Summit Chasers? And give an example of what can happen, what can transpire,
Oh,
what could populate out on the other end after working with you guys.
yeah, no, that's a great. I mean, I can give you a couple examples of clients we're working with right now. So, kind of where they're at is again, they have this great idea, this great product, and they have a great, like, this is the problem I want to solve, right? But they're either running up against, okay, I scaled too fast and now other things are falling apart, right? Or I don't know how to scale appropriately right now, like I can't get it out to enough people, or I can't get the right people on board in order for me to be able to step away and work on the visionary stuff, right? So we have a client right now who they have a mothership, right? And they're brokers, like they buy and sell real estate, but that's their mothership, but they have these other passion projects. They have these other, like, this is what they truly want to do, which is broker consulting and coaching. And then they also have it's really, really cool. They have it's called Kid and Me Kids, where they do, they're from India, and they want to do like animations and books for children that immigrate from other countries, so they feel accepted and they see that they're like being represented and that kind of stuff. Um, but their business is set in a way where they have to be involved 99.99% of the time. And a lot of it is because when they're bringing people in or they're hiring people, they don't have like a clear path of what they want to achieve, and they don't have the systems to duplicate it, right? So they're constantly involved. So what we do is we bring in is we really, well, first of all, we find out, okay, where are you lacking? Like, where do we have to work on with you? Because the business owners, they're the ceiling, and the business can't grow past that ceiling, right? So if you stop growing as the business owner, that's as much as you're going to grow. Like, that's it. You're the cap, right? So we work on, okay, here's where here's some weaknesses. We do a personal SWOT. Here's some weaknesses that you could work on, whether it's your leadership, your business planning, whatever it is, sales, marketing, whatever it is. We identify that and we put together a personal plan for them. But anyways, that's what we do with the business owner, right? We really work on trying to develop their leadership and business capacity, right? But then adjacently, we really try to define, okay, what is the vision and mission purpose of the company? So we work on like core values, business principles, your purpose or mission statement, something that if I can bring people in and get them unified around this, like, this is where we're going, this is the direction that we're rowing, and we need everybody rowing in the same direction. A lot of companies don't even have that. They're like, you come in, you get paid for me telling you what to do, and you should do it. When you only have 10 to, even if you have 10 to 50 people in your company, not everybody's gonna be rowing in the same direction. You're not going to get people bought in, especially in the small business. That's a lot different life than if you go work at corporate. Corporate, it's 9 to 5. You get this many vacation days, you get this. But if you're a small business, it's 7 to 7. It's 7 to midnight. It's maybe holidays, maybe not holidays. So if you don't have a team that's bought into the vision and is willing to do the work to get there, just like you, if they don't bleed the colors like you do, it's really, really tough, right? So it's finding that unified vision. What's the flag that we unify the team around, and we really clearly define that. And we use some of like that headshot concept. So the three circles, which is, what can we be the best in the world at? What are we most passionate about? And what drives our economic engine? And then from there, we work on, okay, what does your company need to look like in order to achieve that? So we really clearly define, we call it like mapping out your path, right? So we clearly define, okay, this is where we need to be in 5 years. Let's work backwards. Let's put together a strategic plan to get here in a year. Here's the steps we need to take in order to achieve this. And here's what it needs to look like, right? And here's the next step, right? So we try to, like, for me, Gord, let's buy you a shirt. For some people, it might be, okay, let's go teach you how to hire a number two, right? Like, whatever the next step is, right? But we need to find out where you want to go, work your way backwards, and set stretch goals to there. And I find a lot of this too. A lot of companies, they don't set like far enough goals. Like, they're not far enough away in time, but like big enough goals. Because if we said, okay, I just want to grow 10% this quarter, I mean, you could do nothing. You could stay the same and grow 10%, right? Especially if the market is working for you. Even if it's not, most companies can grow 10% just doing the same thing. But if you say, I want to grow 50%, the decisions you have to make is a lot different. The type of work you have to put in is a lot different. The amount of growth you have to put into yourself is a lot different. That's a different type of person that grows 50% in a quarter than one that grows 5 to 10%. So if we can set those bigger goals, it actually narrows our focus and allows you to be much more pointed in the decisions you make. But anyways, that's kind of our mapping out your path. And then make a clock. So it's kind of the acronym of Summit. So we start with you, unify your team, map your path, and then make a clock. Make a clock is really, that's your systems and process. What are you doing now? Let's document what you're doing now. We use something called a CCF, which is a critical client flow. We map out what you're doing now, and we identify leaks and opportunities. We try not to change everything because that's not, it wouldn't work that way. But what are you doing now? What small things can we optimize? And now how can we duplicate this? Right? Now, how can we turn it into training? How can we turn it into onboarding? How can we turn it into whatever it is, right? Just SOPs, right? Because a lot of companies don't, a lot of, especially small businesses, even big businesses don't have that. And then from there, we move into some like the I. The I is increasing your talent density. So now that we have all this set up, how do you hire for the right? How do you hire key roles? How do you hire key players? A lot of people don't. They hire their brother's friend, or they hire this person's resume. They've done something similar before. Let's bring them in. When you have to hire for purpose, like what is the outcome we're trying to achieve? We need to hire for that outcome, right? So, and like a good example of this is like if you have a sales manager and you want to hire a new sales manager, you want to hire a new sales manager for a current market that you're working, that you're just trying to penetrate deeper into, or are you trying to hire a sales manager for a new market that doesn't have any business and you're trying to penetrate a new market? That's a much different skill set. But if you just hire a sales manager who has sales manager experience, you could get, they might not have experience enough or the skill set to achieve this specific outcome. So we work on how do you define for the roles you're trying to hire? How do you source them? Selection process, and then how do you do the offer? So how do you make sure that when you find the right person, how do you make sure that they take the offer? So that's increasing the talent density, and as well as going through like leadership development. So how do we, quarterly reviews and one-on-one coaching, and how do you, lead by example, communicating with your team, understanding that communication isn't about the words you say, it's about the outcome you've achieved by the communication. And then the T is time to scale. So that's the fun stuff. Once we have that foundation, then let's put all that together, and then we either work with them on their sales and marketing aspect, or we bring in somebody like yourself. Again, strategic partnerships. We bring in somebody like yourself to come in. This team, they're super solid business wise. They're ready to blow up. Take her away from here, Scott. But that's the kind of the premise of what we do. And then by the end of it, a lot of the companies that we work with, like it almost scales themselves because everything's set up. Like everything's moving smoother because things are documented. They're more innovative because they're bringing the right people in, right? Their skills are much higher because we've created habits, whether it's them reading every night or developing themselves or pushing themselves, and then in turn they're leading by example. They're communicating better, right? So the business almost scales itself at that point without having to do, whatever, right? But again, most of the time, I like to partner with people, I like to stay in my lane, and bring in great people like you at that point.
Yeah, I mean, strategic partnerships, it's what it's all about. But, I really love what you described, because when a business or a company like Summit Chasers is clear on what they deliver, then obviously on the client facing side of things, they know exactly what they're going to get. But it is a collaboration. You know, Nancy and I teach very similar things, but you have to meet people in the middle. You
Mhm.
can't, you have to allow that company or that strategic plan that's put in place. You got to give it time to work, but you also have to have the necessary things in place to make them work.
Yeah.
Another quick thing before I get to my final question, something that really populated for me, and for a lot of these people, you can't see the label from inside the jar, right? So instead of working in your business, allow people to help you work on your business. So having extra sets of eyeballs allow you to see the kinks, allow you to see the holes, the gaps. What are those things? What are those bottlenecks that are holding you back from not achieving the things that you want to achieve? So before I get to my final question, if someone is interested, either an individual company, small business is interested in connecting with you, finding out more about Summit Chasers, what's the best place, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Zach Carlin, or Summit Chasers Network on LinkedIn, or you can go to SCN Get Started. So Summit Chasers Network Get Started, SCN Get Started, and you can book there. But we're on every social platform. We have the podcast. You can always comment on there or anything like that. But if you want to directly find out how we could work with you, then SCN Get Started.
Awesome. So all that information that Zach shared obviously will be in the description of this episode, but also in the email that goes out the morning that the episode comes out. So you're not going to have to look too far. So Zach, final question before we sign off. What does success truly mean to you?
Now, ever since you told me that you were going to ask that question, I've been thinking about it almost every day since then. I'm not exaggerating whatsoever every day. So what success means to me, and this goes to a quote. I can't remember where the quote was, but they posted a picture of the Queen. And this was like, she's been gone for 6 months, and I bet this is the first time you thought of her since she passed. And I was like, yeah, that's very true. Even like the Queen of England, she passed away, and I haven't batted an eye. Right. So a lot of like, what does success mean to me? And this might sound kind of morbid, but it's going to be, who are the people that show up to my funeral? How many people show up to my funeral, and why are they showing up to my funeral? Is it because they want to make sure I'm dead, or is it because I made an impact in their life in a positive way? Right. And I like, I paid it forward. So I think that's kind of what I landed on. I think it's just how many people show up to my funeral when I pass for the right reasons.
Well, there's a great book I'm going to recommend to you. It's from a fellow Canadian. His name is Cody Schewin, and the book is called Everyday Legacy. I'm not going to give up too much of what the book is about, but I highly recommend you read it. Cody's a great guy, friend of mine. It's a bestseller. And just the whole premise of the book is leaving your legacy while you're still living, not when you're gone. And I love that concept. I love that principle. And our legacies are the only things that get left behind. You know, when we're gone, you know, it was at the time that we're recording this, the day before this, it was Martin Luther King Day. And, you know, he would have been 90, I think 7 or 98 years old this year. And he's been gone for 50 some years. But his legacy still lives on. People still quote him all the time like he was just here. And I think not everyone has to strive to be Martin Luther King, but I think every single one of us should look to try to impact as many people as we can in a positive way while we're still here. So, Zach, always enjoy our conversations. Just grateful for you and everything that you share today. And I know my audience is going to take so much away from this. So thank you again for being here today.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough, my friend. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. And looking forward to obviously more strategic partnerships and collaborations with you. And again, for those that are listening and watching, please like, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, turn that notification bell on. If you're listening, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, wherever, please subscribe. Leave us a rating and review. Let us know what you loved most about this episode so we can continue to bring you exactly what you want. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your days, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much for checking out today's episode. If you could, please support this podcast by hopping over to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any place that you're listening to this. Leave us a rating and review. Let us know what you loved most and what you would like to hear more of. But also, if you would like to learn how to take your business to the next level, whether it's using LinkedIn or working directly with myself and Nancy in our intimate group coaching programs, you can head over to www.thetimetogrow.com or scottaaron.net to learn more. Thank you again for your support, love and gratitude, and I'll talk to you soon.